If we can get this to work the way I need it to, we're about to have a great conversation. But I need to make sure this is going to work the way I need it to work. Hey, Mike. We're getting ready to talk about the movie The Joker and the mental health component. Me and a couple of my friends have had the opportunity to finally watch this movie and sit down and digest it. So we thought it'd be a really interesting conversation. So I'm waiting for him to join so I can bring him on camera. And then we are going to jump right in. There he goes. See how this bandwidth and this Comcast Wi-Fi works out. Because it's telling me it's adding them. So let's see. Happy Monday, y'all. Happy Memorial Day. I see a little person in the back in the screen. Hey, Alex. We're about to talk about the Joker and mental health awareness. I'm waiting for my friend to be added. It is taking forever for this to happen, and I don't know why. Abe is saying you're already in the broadcast. Um, but I think it's something. Look at the bottom of your screen. Ah, there we go. I'm
And there
like,
we go. Yeah, I was like, we in business now. We are in business.
I'm looking like it said he's already on here. So what is going on?
Yes, indeed.
Just so you know,
Try to get
SJ
good.
might randomly pop in over my shoulder. So
Okay, that's fine. I'm just trying to get my camera good and angled because I'm on the sofa. So you know how it is.
you got to
It's,
be
it is a
comfortable.
it is a holiday.
It definitely is. And I don't know why I thought it was a good idea to sit out here on this patio.
I bet
Um,
it's hot out there.
it's not Texas hot, but it is
Oh,
a
I
nice
know.
day. So it's a good setting for us to have this conversation.
Tis.
And hopefully people will kind of chime in because I know the Joker was in movies some months ago.
Yeah.
Now I'm thinking they were intentional in bringing it to HBO and making it available
Mm-hmm.
for people to be able to watch because May is Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what sparked it for me. And I don't know if I influenced your watching of the movie because of like my Facebook post and thoughts behind watching it, but I was excited when you did because I'm like, we need to talk about this in
Yeah.
one of our conversations.
Yes. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Really break it down. No, I don't know what was going on. It was Friday night. Wasn't really doing much of anything, and I was like, I've heard heard people say a lot of good things about the movie, and it popped up
Mm-hmm.
on recommended shows.
Okay.
So I was like, hey, let me give it a watch. I first I thought it was gonna be a rehash of the Joker story.
Mm-hmm.
I went into it with all these preconceived notions, and it was completely different than what I expected.
and and that's kind of the same for me. Like I saw the previews, and I am Marvel and DC till
Hmm.
I die, but more so Marvel. Sorry, DC. However, the Joker is one of my favorite villains, right? Has
Hmm.
always been. But yet when I saw the previews for the movie, I was like, I don't necessarily need to know his origin story. I don't really care that much, and it just wasn't
Right.
grasping me like the typical superhero esque type movie. And I still might be a little bitter after the whole end game,
Yeah.
and how that turned out. So I might be on a superhero hiatus. I can admit that. I'm definitely gonna admit that. But my daughter, my middle daughter, was working in the movie theaters because, of course, she's been laid off due to COVID. But she took the opportunity to go see it, and she was telling me like, "Ma, you really need to watch this. It's not what you think. It's really really deep. And the depression lives in our home in some way,
Hmm.
shape, fashion, or form. Somebody has been touched by it and or still struggles with it. So that is something that is very
Yes.
very near and dear to our hearts here. So of course, I'm held captive because I'm home like most of us are. And it came on. I'm like,
Right.
let me look at this. And I watched it, and then I watched it again with SJ. Like he actually watched it with me, and we had some conversation because it's interesting with the 4 year old perspective. But we had
Hmm.
some conversations about it, and there was a lot that resonated. Like I put my summary in the caption of this live for people who didn't see the Facebook post.
Right.
But let's kind of talk about that first. Like let's start there.
Oh, okay.
What are some of the parallels that you saw in regards to the movie, be it the Joker himself and his behaviors, the whys behind the behaviors. They showed a little bit about Bruce Wayne as a kid, but the story was more
Hmm.
so about his dad. And there
Yeah.
was some dynamics there, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
so just what are some of the parallels that you saw between fiction and real life?
So I mean, if you really think about this, is he was raised with this belief system. So he had these social constructs that and almost labels that were put upon thrust upon him before he even knew who he was.
Yeah.
And a lot of that happens in everyday society. We'll see something or see someone behave in a certain way, and we'll just say, "Oh, they're this," or "they're that," and without understanding why, the why behind the
Hmm.
what, if you will. Uh, and it's a popular thing, now where you it's the person plus the condition, like, so whatever they're a person first, so you have to respect the humanity of that person, and then we can get to address the conditions or condition the condition or conditions that are presenting themselves. So I think with his story, mainly it was a lot of there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of
Hmm.
uncertainty, and he was battling against a lot of those things that were in his life, because again, there were pieces of his life that he didn't really fully even have a grasp of or understanding of, but he was going off of what he was told.
So as a grown man, he is walking around with absolutely no real sense of self. He had an
Right.
identity that was given to him, right? He was weird. He had some type of mental illness, so he was
Mm-hmm.
bullied. He was bullied both as a child and he was bullied as an adult in his present day,
Yes.
right? He
Yeah.
was heavily medicated. Now, based on the violence that came um, somewhat as a result of him not taking
Mm-hmm.
medication anymore. We could argue, right, whether or
Right.
not he was overly medicated or whether or not he was properly medicated. And
Mm-hmm.
we could also argue as to whether or not that medication played an effect on his mental state because it
Right.
never tells us who diagnosed him.
Right.
It
He has a card. He has this little card that shows that he has an uncontrollable laughter, and that he has a condition. Uh, but as far as what he was taking, what was prescribed to him,
Mhm.
the frequency of that those dosage, any of that. So we don't have any of that story. But what we do see is the outward manifestation of it.
Yep.
But when you think about, you know, as it's, I mean, I know this is a spoiler alert for those who haven't seen it, but
It's on
finding
cable
that,
by now, so it is what
right,
it is.
that, his mother wasn't his mother. Like,
Hmm.
he was truly adopted. I mean, I think that really sent him into a tailspin, but I think the medication almost kept him in a certain place of almost handicapped him to a degree.
Hmm.
I think once he got free of the medication, he was able to realize himself in a different way or see himself in a different way. But the medication did cloud his vision. That's what I saw.
And you know what? It's it's funny how, of course, this story had a negative spin to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with you from that standpoint. When he got off the medication, he started feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, rage was a very real part of those feelings, but it stemmed from the hurt, right? So we always say,
Yeah.
that anger is the second emotion. It
Mm-hmm.
Anger is not what you just wake up with. That's not what just manifests. It is typically a result of something else. And
Correct.
in his case, it was the result of, to your point, so he been lied to. A part of that lie was him believing that he was actually Bruce Wayne's brother, and
Right.
that his father had rejected him, right?
Yeah.
He, a lot of scenarios played out in his mind, which appeared to have been real, where he was in this relationship with the neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
um he was accepted, right? Like, very
Mm-hmm.
normal healthy things were playing out fictitiously in his mind,
Yeah.
um because they were absent in his present day. And he started to realize that once the medication went away, I kind of got to keep my eye, like, it is some wasp out here, or
Oh, okay,
some
okay. I'm like, what is you?
oh
Okay.
Jesus, or some big bumblebees. So if I just take off running, just keep talking, I'll be back. I'm just
Okay.
trying to avoid the sting. So yes, I'm not
Right.
crazy, but I'm out the peripheral, like,
Right.
oh, we're not doing this. But anyway, so
Right.
so when he started being able to feel, um
Start being able to feel. But you got to think about too. Like, let's take his just that piece that you said about, he had been lied to, and the
mhm,
narrative that he had been given, um, and feeling like, you know the story that he believed that he had staked his whole identity against a lie,
yep,
against a mistruth. And I look at even real, like, everyday society, like us,
mhm,
as people, a lot of us have staked our identities against a farce, some, to a degree, until you chip away at some of that stuff. Like, there's some of those things you hear as a child growing up. Oh, you're this or you're that, or you're gonna be this or you're gonna be that.
mhm.
And a lot of us put stock in that, and we grow up believing those things, and those are the furthest thing from the truth.
Now, I kind of love that you said that, because as a parent, and someone who is always on this soapbox, about being a mom and being a parent, and I'm very transparent in sharing, like, things that I've gone through.
Mm-hmm.
His mother, in my opinion, was at the core of the breakdown for a number of reasons. One, you get some of the backstory of, she allowed him to be in abusive settings.
Mm-hmm.
Two, she had been clinically diagnosed and hospitalized,
Yes.
for having a mental illness. Although that was not his biological mother, it appeared that that was hereditary in some type of sense,
Yeah.
right? So he inherited it potentially from her, or from,
Environmental conditioning.
and right, because of the fact that he sat in
Yeah.
those conditions, that was his
Yeah.
normal. He saw, quote unquote, crazy as his normal, so he
Mm-hmm.
embodied that. And then her reactions when
Yeah.
he confronted her. Now, granted, it wasn't the best conditions to have that conversation
Right.
because she was already hospitalized. But when you see those snippets of the different parts of what their relationship was like, he was her caretaker, but he was like her
Mm-hmm.
husband too,
Yes.
right? He was the only man in her life. And I'm saying this intentionally because, as someone, who is raising a son, as someone
Mm-hmm.
who has raised girls primarily by myself, because I've been the consistent example in their lives. Parents often make the mistake of only presenting that one side of the
Yeah.
conversation. Um,
Yeah.
if you grow up in a single mom or dad home and there is no relationship with the other parent, then
Hmm.
the only thing you learn how to navigate is the relationship between you and that parent, not
Right.
the opposite sex parent, or you don't get an opportunity to see what a healthy relationship looks like for you and that opposite
Right.
sex parent. And as parents, we do our children a disservice when we do that. And in his case, it was
Hmm.
a huge one.
Yeah.
There was no
It
man
was
in
very
his
big.
life.
Done. And every male figure in his life, I hate to say it, they were toxic.
Yep.
They played part of the they became part of the narrative, part of the abuse, part of the bullying, part of the just all the negative output, outputs or and behaviors. That's what he saw. And even up until the coworker that gave him the gun, you know,
Hmm.
when you think about that, like, yeah, in a moment you probably say, okay, he gave him something to defend himself with, but then at the same time, when it came time for him to own up to what he did,
He threw him under the
then
bus.
he threw him under the bus
Yep.
and he walked away. He washed his hands of it. He said, I don't know where he got that gun from. I don't want no parts of it.
And like that lack of accountability, that
Yeah,
negative example, right? He latched on to that young man because he paid him attention. Now granted, it was
yeah,
negative attention, and then we see
yeah,
the hurt play out there, and the
yeah,
disappointment too, because of the fact that um when they come to visit him at the apartment, we see
yeah,
how that plays out. And where did that come from?
yeah,
That was that hurt, and that was that disappointment. That was that ability to feel. And before we go any farther, let me give this disclaimer, just in case someone stumbles across this, or they come in the midst. We are not therapists. We are two people who watched
right,
the Joker and are having a conversation about it. So do not take anything that we say as actual legal and or therapeutic counseling advice, because this is not that. We are having the
correct.
conversation from the seats that we sit in. Both of us sit in the HR space. We both sit in the educational space in one way or another. Abe does work inside
Hmm.
of the prisons. So we're not novices to the conversation. However, we do not legally or professionally sit in a clinician seat. So I just want to put that out there,
Correct.
because
Yeah.
don't
Hey,
call
I'm
me.
I'm all for it. Don't call me. Right, exactly. No.
But
I can
that
I can refer you to some places though. I
but
can
don't
give you a
call me.
list of who to call.
But
Um,
with that being said, moving right on along. So
but
no.
think about it, like what you just said. I mean, yeah, like with respect to him and
Hey
the
Tiff.
exchange between him and that gentleman.
Hmm.
When he came to the apartment, that hurt and that rage, because again, here's yet another archetype in his life that has failed him.
Hmm.
Like this was a person in his life that he had, felt supported him as a clown, supported him in his career,
He called him a
encouraged
friend.
him, called
Yeah.
him a friend, thought he was being looking out for him and helping him, and then he basically destroyed that belief. It's like
Hmm.
it's one of those things of when even you think about just friendships. Just think about, let's go back to high school. We can go back, take it all the way back to high school. We had friends in high school that we thought was the cat's meow. You know, they was everything.
Right.
But you later find out who they are as people as you get older, and you're like, oh, I don't know that I can necessarily sustain that friendship because it's not a healthy one. Now, we wouldn't probably go to the extent that he did, but
Because
we
it's not
might
that
sever
deep.
that right. We might
Yeah.
sever that relationship though.
And you made
Yeah.
a very good point. And I think about this, and I've more so often thought about this over the last couple of years as I've been shifting
Hmm.
in my journey, right? And just growing as a person outside of the professional space, just naturally growing as a person. There are a
Mm-hmm.
lot of friendships that were near and dear to me through childhood that as we've matured into adults, I realize certain
Yeah.
things about them. Fortunately for me, I'm not in a seat of where the Joker is, where, they were all that I had. But I've
Mm-hmm.
had to accept, the toxicity. I've had to accept the one sidedness. Even if it was me being on the other side of it, right? If I'm always receiving or I'm always pouring, it's still a one-sided relationship,
Right.
and it's not healthy. And from a toxicity standpoint, anything, especially from a relationship place, that drains
Yeah.
you is unhealthy. His
Correct.
entire existence was exhausting and unhealthy. Every
Yes.
relationship that they showed for him throughout the duration of that film was exhausting and
Mm-hmm.
unhealthy. However, he had no emotional intelligence.
Right.
He had he was not emotionally mature, and he had never been taught how to constructively and amicably sever ties with someone,
Right.
nor had he ever experienced that. So for him to put an end to a relationship, he had to kill him.
Yeah. He had to just that was the end of it. That's the only way that he could, ensure that they were gone, if you will, in more ways than one.
In more ways than one.
Right.
But
But I think too. But you got to think about it like this: is he had this extreme, like you said, the anger was the second emotion. The rage was those things were after the fact. But a lot of it was stemmed from that hurt. He was
mhm.
hurt first, and then he acted out.
And he was hurt
You know, and,
consistently.
and he was hurt consistently. And so at the point where we're introduced to the Joker, in the Batman series, you think about that's why he can, laugh it off, if you will, or, you know, kill without, at will, because he's been conditioned to this point. And all these little microaggressions throughout his life led up to him being who he was. And like I said, it doesn't absolve him of
Not at all.
anything,
No.
because violence doesn't beget violence. You don't do that. But at the same time, it helps you humanize him, and that's what my post was. It helped me humanize him in a way that I had never done that before. Because you think of him
Mhm.
as a maniacal killer, and then you think like, dang, well, what if I were in that situation? What if I had been brought into that, reared in that situation where I had a completely dysfunctional life, dysfunctional parenting, dysfunctional upbringing,
Mhm.
dysfunctional friends, and there was never even a glimmer of even hope. And the one time he did get a glimmer of hope was the talk show, and he thought for just once somebody would notice me,
Whew.
somebody would give me a chance, a stage, a platform,
Yep.
only to be ridiculed on national TV.
Because it was intentional. So Tiffany said
Yeah.
hurt people definitely hurt people, right? It
Yeah.
creates a cycle because it
Yes.
is normal for them. Again, it's not an
Yeah.
excuse, because I am the
Right.
last person that will ever make an excuse for the foolishness. It's not an excuse.
Right.
However, to start to support people through healing and to make sure
Mm-hmm.
that the narratives begin to shift positively the way they should, there
Mm-hmm.
has to be a place of empathy, and there has to be a level of understanding that is applied.
Yes.
And it does not mean that you have to sit next to and parallel to a person through every experience that they've had. You just have to be able to be compassionate and to listen. And another comment
Yes.
was, it shows that the environment that you grow up in truly shapes who you will be. His
Mm-hmm.
environment, his environment did shape him. His mental illness was somewhat of a caveat. That was like the cherry on top,
Yes. Right.
because it's very possible that had he grown up in healthy, thriving conditions with positive examples, he
Mm-hmm.
would have gotten the support that he needed and been able to draw the differentiations between right and
Yes.
wrong. But
Yes.
something that I want us to dig into, because everything that you said like propels us to the end. That
Yes.
end shook me to the core. Him standing on top of that car and being
Yeah.
brought to life and being painted as a hero for the
Yes.
destruction and the movement that he caused. Now you know I'm about to put my HR hat on, right?
Yes. Yes, you are. Go
The
ahead.
leadership, the
Yeah.
leadership and the influence, both inadvertently and intentionally, that was placed in that moment. And we got a couple of other
Yes.
comments. Let's see. Yep, especially if you don't get the help that you need. And then some of the most deadly serial killers had normal family environments. That is definitely,
Yeah.
definitely true. So there is not a one size fit all. There's just glimmers of hope and possibility. But let's talk about this this leadership dynamic. And I'm going somewhere
Right.
with this because we're both African American. We
Yes.
both grew up in some interesting backgrounds and have thrived
Yeah.
regardless. And we both are often in the community and often work with the community. So
Yes.
that's where I'm going with this, from a place of you have to identify not just the mental illness component to it, but the fact that leadership sits, regardless to if it's positive and proactive or if it's reactive
Hmm.
and negative. Leadership at a peer level,
Yeah.
leadership at a being made into an icon level, all of these things are very real and they exist in our communities. And that
Yeah.
end piece where the Joker was made to be a hero with all of the tragedy that he caused, right? He gained even more notoriety from, to your point, being on that talk show and making the decision
Yeah.
that he made in regards to the talk show host. People
Yes.
viewed that differently than what we viewed it. We said, oh no, that's not what you do. But people who sat in seats like
Yeah.
his,
Yes.
who had been hurt,
He
who
gave
had
he
been
gave he gave them
rejected,
voice. He
he
gave
gave
them
them a
voice. He
voice.
gave them yes. And he became the amplifier for change in that community. If you think about like serial killers and we hear about them, they have these fan clubs. A lot of people that have, you know, committed, you know,
Heinous
crimes, if
crimes.
you will.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
you? I won't say. I didn't want to say heinous because I want to sound like an episode of SVU.
Touche, touche, touche,
but
touche.
but however, they really they have a they have they end up becoming that magnet, you know, for people who are in who don't have that voice, who don't feel like they can say, and that's why you get the copycat crimes. You
Yep.
get they get those behaviors because it's like, oh, if they can do it, then I can do it, and I'm going to do it better. It goes to say with particularly with his story, how much I think his first time that he killed, it shook him. But if you
And
notice
it was self
throughout,
defense.
yes, and you notice throughout, every time he killed after that, he got joy. So
Yep.
it shook him at first. It made him feel some certain kind of way. And he was like, oh, I really just killed somebody. And yes, I was defending myself. I killed these guys. And he was visibly moved by that.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think right after that is when he went to the neighbor's house and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
did to do whatever, you know,
Because they don't
and
show
she
that,
was
so we don't really we assume what happened
right.
there.
Right.
Yep, they want to be
Right.
glorified and noticed in the same light. Oh Lord, the politics then came into the conversation. The politics.
Well, you know, it is a political season. This is going to happen.
We are not
Um,
stereotyping. We will. So I'm
no.
not reading that comment on the live. But we are not stereotyping
Right.
because I'm not diminishing the conversation from that standpoint, demographic, or whatever
Right.
the case may be. I'm more interested in it from how it manifests in the communities of people who look like me, and then
Yes.
how
I
we
mean,
have
but
conversations and are misunderstood behind it.
but think about it. We again we stake our identity. We go back to the whole thing. it became his identity. Yeah, I don't. He didn't start out as a killer, a serial killer, or a murderer.
He didn't.
He became he became situations, environments, failure on top of failure, dysfunction on top of dysfunction. All these layers
Poverty,
created who
because
he.
he was poor.
Yes, poverty. He was poor, impoverished. Um, you name it. Just everything. All these various layers stacked on top of each other created who he became.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't help but if you draw those parallels in our communities, you think about communities of color, particularly the ones that we serve in, and you see some of those same things happen: poverty
Identical
and
dynamics.
dysfunction. Yes. And then you're like, dang, maybe they didn't go out and kill somebody, but they still are stifled and stunted in their trajectory and their growth
That's right.
because of all these things.
And
So,
like seriously, that is what tugged at my heartstrings with this, right? Because
mhm,
we see origin stories, we see white males paraded across cinema, like American Psycho, right? All of the great serial killers were predominantly
mhm,
white males. So we especially put a face and a look to what that is. And then in the media it plays out and they immediately run to the mental illness defense.
yeah,
However, the exact same dynamics will exist in communities of color. You're going to be painted as a monster.
you
Mental
are
illness is not going to come into the conversation because
correct.
it's just who you are, right? Like that is it's just who you are. So that's the
Right.
expectation of it. However, the exact same dynamics,
Mhm,
the in some cases it's an undiagnosed versus a diagnosed. So no one even has the
correct.
idea or even knows enough about it to be able to have that conversation on the people of color side, as
Right.
opposed to the non-people of color where we spent the money to get them diagnosed. It's gonna go away, right?
Well, the thing is, and I having just completed that abnormal psych class, it was really one of those situations where you see the parallels, and oftentimes, and it quoted it in the book that says that in the court, when you have a situation where there is a person of color versus a non-person of person of color, that the non-person of color oftentimes gets committed to get the non-person of color gets committed to a mental institution by and
We go to
large
jail.
greater, and we go to jail
Yeah.
to deal with our stuff. We get incarcerated to deal with ourselves. Yes, but and everyone's like, well, but mental institutions and mental homes are, similar to jail. But no, there's still a level of freedom that exists because once they go through their treatment, oftentimes they're released back into society.
Yep.
Whereas a person of color that's incarcerated, they might have to do 15, 20 years, and their condition is never treated.
It's
They
never
might
been
give them
diagnosed.
never diagnosed, never treated, never understood what even caused it. I mean, and if they don't do the work themselves and somehow figure out, hey, I have something going on within me I got to deal with, then they spend 15, 20 years cycling through, and they come back out on this side of it and still have that same condition. The condition doesn't go away. It doesn't just poof. We're done with this.
And that is absolutely correct. So right, so May is not just mental health awareness month. Mother's Day happens during May.
Yeah.
um, Depression spikes because there are individuals who either sit in a mother seat who feel some type of way about it, or have lost parents and don't
Mm-hmm.
have a mother to celebrate and they feel some type of way about it, or have a living parent and they don't have the relationship that they, on either side, the mother to the child to the mother. So emotions are typically at an all-time high. One of
Right.
the one of the greatest parts of depression that is attached to motherhood is postpartum depression.
Hmm.
I went through it with my first daughter, had no idea. I didn't even know what it was, right? Never had heard of it. Didn't know until years later that that is what I was going through. It
Hmm.
is an extremely common occurrence after giving birth to a child. It is, and I was literally having this conversation last night with a friend because of something else, but it is um, something that now, if you get pregnant, they have you basically self diagnosed by checking off a questionnaire. It's
Right.
still not given the attention that it truly needs to until. Now, why am I saying this? Because we've all heard the stories of the mothers who've driven their kids off of bridges, of the mothers who've put their babies in microwaves, of the mothers who have, seemingly abandoned them with boyfriends or people whom they trusted or whatever the case may be. But you don't have the
Mm.
conversation around the whys behind that either. It's not an excuse. I'm not explaining it
No.
away. I am speaking to the point of all of these variants exist. All of these different types of depression, of mental illness, of a need to speak to someone, a need to cry out, a need to be heard,
Yeah.
a need to be understood and loved
Well, and be acknowledged. Like
and
you
be
said, be heard,
acknowledged.
be acknowledged, like that they exist. I mean, and if you think about a lot of, and I'll say no, seemingly normal functioning people exist in today's world, and social media has done a great job of creating a platform for that validation and for that acknowledgement. But
Has
it
it?
also, well, say ha 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 ha
Ha
ha.
ha.
But wait, there's more. uh, but you think about these platforms that exist. They're structured to give you that sense of acknowledgement and validation by the likes and the hearts and the this and the that.
And it's
But those are,
superficial.
it is. It is.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, taking a pain pill for a headache. And you like, okay, I got this headache. I'm gonna keep taking these pain pills, keep taking these pain
Mm-hmm.
pills. So every day that I get on one of these platforms, these hearts and these likes become that my antidote, if you will. But I've never truly dealt with what is causing me or driving me to these platforms. I've never understood that. I've never even sought it out because it's my placebo. It makes me feel good temporarily.
So, what was the Joker's root, right? What was his root? Because the reality of it is as we have this conversation, and as we continue to go back out into the community and do what we do, we're one person, right? So there's one person at a
Yep.
time. What is it? How do we help people to start to identify that root so that they can want in themselves to start to seek out the help, especially us, right? Fortunately, in 2020, mental health is a thing now. We've made it cool. So
Yeah.
we can talk
Yeah.
about the way that we feel. We have had
Yeah.
famous black men crying on TV. So men are looking like, yes, this is okay. I hate that it had to happen that way, but it has happened. So now I'm gonna take it and I'm
Yeah.
gonna run with it. So what do we need to do to start to identify that root so that we can start to self, and I'm getting an echo. Do you hear echo? Because I can take my headphones out if I need to.
Hold on. Hold on.
Better? Okay.
Hold on. There's connection. There we go. I had to reconnect my headset.
Perfection. All right.
Yes.
So
Okay.
so how do we identify that root in ourselves so that we can start to seek out the help that we need?
I think it's about having an honest conversation. I think, we have to also say that we deal with our things because it's so easy for us to be, well, we'll say on the other side of the what the low that we felt,
Hmm.
and we don't say how do we get through it. So I know for my friend, my peer group, I'm very open about I've sought out counseling. I had to. Like
Mm-hmm.
there were times in my life there were just things I could not process through. I didn't feel comfortable talking to, a friend or to my mom or
Yep.
to my dad, or I needed I needed an unbiased person who didn't know anything about me to be able to I could get it out of my head. Um, and it's just being having that open and that candid conversation so as you interact with people, not to shame, like, like I'm very quick to tell people, like, hey, it's cool, you can go to therapy. Therapy is a good thing.
It's okay. It really
it's
is
it's
okay.
quite all right. We all have moments where we need to talk to somebody. And it's kind of that, instead of struggling and being and hurting in silence, you don't have to. There's a voice,
Mm-hmm.
there's an outlet, there's an opportunity. There's EAP programs, speaking from an HR perspective, there's EAP programs at work that you can access. If nothing else, being able to get down to the root. I know I can speak for myself. I can say that a lot of what I had to deal with, I had to unpack a lot of things. Like, yes, in all the successes that I've accomplished and things like I've done, what I realized what was before was my driving factor was a fear of failure.
Mm.
At the end of the day, me not feeling adequate enough in my own self drove a lot of things that I did.
Give me a minute.
And when you sit back and you think about, like, what really motivates us intrinsically, extrinsically, what motivates us? And mine was, I never wanted to be seen as a failure.
Mm.
But part of it was because I felt like I was a failure in some ways. So when you think about it, when you're like, dang, like, and everybody else like, hey, Abe, you're the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Mm-hmm.
And
But
I'm
you're
like,
like,
no,
no,
no. I
no.
mean, I might be a wheat biscuit, a little
Yeah.
dry, maybe some water, but
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
other than that, you think, okay, we gotta start having the open dialogue in the groups that we are part of. If you're in a group and somebody we recognize those things. Like I immediately recognize when people, like, okay, because I had to go to therapy. I'm like, okay, hey, have you
You might
talked?
want
Have
to
you
talk to
talked? Have you?
somebody.
You might want to talk to somebody about that,
Yeah.
because we dealing. So yeah,
Now,
it's just that.
there's a flip side to that, right?
Yeah,
Because we're saying, and I'm not gonna act like it's a perfect picture and everything equally exists. So the EAP
right.
programs, the employee assistant programs, are
Yeah,
for people who are employed, and are for
yes,
people who are employed in certain types of positions.
correct.
So I don't necessarily know that a McDonald's worker has an EAP program. Or that opportunity, a McDonald's frontline worker, right? Or
Right,
somebody who's a cashier at Walgreens or something along those lines. I don't necessarily know that they have that option.
right,
And we both know that there are free options or low cost
correct.
options that exist in the community.
Your community health
However,
options, yes. Quality,
quality
yeah,
versus quantity,
correct.
and then oversaturation and the exhaustion, because we saw that in the Joker too.
Yeah. The funds just were taken away, so the services had to end. They had to close. They had
Put
to
some on your feet
leave.
first and you can come back.
And a lot of that happens in particularly in lower socioeconomic communities, where that there's a community mental health, community health, outlet, and either the services that either disappear, go away due to funding or lack of funding, or they're again, they're oversaturated. Like, you can't get in to see somebody for a year or 2 years. Well, by then, where are we? They say I'm the joke. I mean, I don't kill 7 people by the time I
At
get a
the
chance
rate
to
he
see
was
somebody.
going, yes.
Right. By the time I don't, by the time I get to see somebody, like, no. And I think it's about also recognizing, like, I knew that the counselor was doing what she could do with what
Once
she
you
was
find work
what she
phone
was
number, you
given.
can come out.
But I think also from the perspective of, she probably saw some things when she read his diary. all those red flags, I'd have been like, wait, whoa, no, 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 no. This is a little deeper than what you telling me, because your diary is telling me a whole nother scenario.
And that points to the failure in the system. Yeah, there
Yeah,
were a lot of other things that were taking place, and we talked about a lot of dynamics, but
yeah,
there was a system failure. Now,
yeah.
keep me honest, because I think that he ended up being prescribed that person, or that social worker. She was tied to his ability to be able to get his medication.
Mm-hmm.
So the absence of her was the absence of the medication. He told the
Right.
story that he just opted to stop taking it, but that wasn't
Yeah.
the reality of it. The reality of it
No.
was he no longer had access to it.
Correct.
So he created the narrative in his mind that it was something that he no longer needed.
Right.
So um, she no longer played a part because they lost the funding.
Mm-hmm.
Everything went to hell from there. However, was she effective when she actually played a part?
The I think it kept him. It gave him some parameters. It gave him some guidelines, some ability to be able to some goalposts to work within. I think that it gave him a sense of accountability because he had to be there in order to get the medication. So there were some good things. Do I feel like there was more that she could have done? We can argue that one way or the other. It's like, okay, yeah, you could have done more.
Mm-hmm.
No, you did what you could with the resources you had. But all we can say is that I think while she was in his life, he had he had some parameters. He had some control limits in place. He had upper and lower control limits in place.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew that he was going to have to answer to somebody. Once
Uh-oh.
so he was able to just go all outside the line if he wanted to.
Mm-hmm. So,
So you think about being a child in that situation. Think about being raised as a child. You grow up and you have these parents, you have these parental figures, these guardians, and they give you these goalposts, if you will. And then when you get grown, you graduate high school, and and I can speak for self. They like, you graduated high school, so you grown now. You can get out my house.
right.
So you don't have these goalposts anymore. You don't have that guide anymore, and so you're just kind of free to roam. Roam about the cabin. Since we ain't none of us been on a plane recently, but you're free to move about the cabin.
And
So
you're left to figure it out. And
and
that's
you're left to figure it
exactly
out.
what happened with him. He was left to figure it out, and him already having been in a deteriorating state,
Right.
right? Because let's be honest, we all have self-talk. The voices you hear
Yes.
in your head does not make you a psycho. We all hear
Mm.
voices in our head. There are conversations that happen inside of our heads. Most of us are rooted in a sense of sanity to a point as to where
Yeah.
we can differentiate at what we should follow and
Hmm.
what we shouldn't, right, when we're being extreme. And that goes back to that, how do we figure out within ourselves,
Right.
like, how do we gauge that so that we start to realize when something is off so that we can ask somebody? And then on the other side of that, from a community standpoint, how do we start to listen to that conversation and be receptive to it? Because in the Black community especially, a lot of jokes are made about mental
Yes.
illness.
A lot of jokes are made about mental illness, and this is not a swipe against any organized faith or religion, but a lot of it's discounted, just shoved onto, hey, go take that to God, go pray about it, get out my face. So again, we're dealing in silence, we're dealing in secrecy, so you're left to deal with this by yourself, between you and your God. That's between you and your God. You hear it all the time. And you're not empowered to be able to have to vocalize or have that conversation with those around you. And rather than saying as a friend, I don't know what to tell you, I don't know how to help you, but I'm here with you. It's that I don't know if you remember the Brene Brown empathy versus sympathy video, like where she says, it's
I took
basically
the course, so I went.
yeah. I mean, where the like one of the animated characters on there, was this giraffe basically,
Mhm.
and giraffe was like, he looks kind of bad down there. Basically, you on your own.
Sorry, I was getting a
you
phone.
so it's but
And
it's
that's
but
the
it's
answer to everything.
but it's bigger that we gotta have some action,
SJ, come
some
here.
true action, behind those words. Otherwise, it becomes empty sentiment.
Yep. Yep. And earlier on, we talked about the empathy and the compassion piece. And
Hmm.
culturally, we need help there.
We do, because guess what? We're conditioned to be strong. We're conditioned, you know. Oh, never let them see you sweat. Never let them see you cry. Never let them see you do anything that remotely resembles a weakness. You could be broken into a million pieces on the inside, but this must stay intact. Poker face.
And it is a generational ingrain, right? It's not something that just popped up now. So the
No.
generation now is more empathetic, they're more open minded, they're more apt to express their vulnerabilities. The flip side of that is we're seeing the spikes in depression at earlier ages.
Hmm.
We're seeing the spikes in suicide at earlier ages
Hmm.
because of that. But it kind of goes hand in hand because at some point somebody was stifled, somebody felt like they weren't heard, they felt like they weren't good enough, and there was no outlet or there was no support there. Now this is a lot, right? This
Hmm.
is not something that can be cured overnight, and it's all
No.
stemming from a fictional character.
Yeah.
However, that fictional character looks so much like so many young men and women, girls and
Yes.
boys that we
Yes.
see on a daily basis, regardless to
Yes.
if they're black, white, blue, pink, orange, polka dot, or
Yes.
purple. That it warrants a conversation, and it was absolutely brilliant that it was made available and
Yes.
free, right, to
Yeah.
those who have cable during a month like May. While
Yes.
mental health awareness is top of mind, while we're all excited about it because we all know once you put it on a t-shirt and it's a hashtag, then it's got
Yeah.
everybody's attention. It was
Hmm.
absolutely brilliant for that movie to be played because although me and you have conversations like this routinely, we don't
Yes.
routinely have them on social media.
We don't.
And a lot of people probably don't routinely have them. And the purpose of us doing this was if two people watch this and they decide to have a conversation about mental health in their home, they don't know how to start the conversation. If they just leverage this movie
Yes.
as a family night movie to start the conversation around mental health awareness, we have done more than.
Or then I
Okay, give
mean,
me a minute.
correct. And
We can go get them.
but it is. I mean, it's super important. I mean, what you said here is, we this is none of this is fixed overnight. None of it's repaired or anything like that. But what we can do is we can start the process. And in starting that process, if we can encourage one or two or three people to even talk through mental health and become aware of their own mental health and their own impulses, I think that we've done, this will be well served. And it's like I said, it's something so important. Like you hear it, mental health, especially as people of color. I know that, you know, just in the studies that are out there, you don't really see a lot of statistics around us, in mental health. There's statistics around non-people of color, and you have to wonder, well, why is that? Is it that we're just not seeking it out? Is it that it's not accessible? It's not available to us? Well, what are some of those reasons?
So it's some of all of the above, and as well as Lord knows, systematic racism exists,
Yeah.
and you don't want to give us an excuse.
Right.
It's not an excuse for anyone else, but it's an excuse when it comes to us. But then we could go off on a tangent now as to it's reasons like this why you need to participate in the census,
Mm-hmm.
why you need to be making sure that you're registered to vote and you're showing up to the polls, why
Yes.
you need to make sure if you don't agree with the people who you see representing us, or you start to position yourself and or get behind the people that you agree with to get in the
Yes.
position to take us to that next level. But we're not ready for that conversation, so we won't use this platform for that. However, right,
Yes. Yes.
it's not just black and white.
No.
There are a lot of different caveats that tie into the how we got here,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of conversations to be had. However, as an individual, there is something that each of us can do inside of our homes to start
Mm-hmm.
to affect them. Parents, when your son cries, don't call him a punk.
Yeah.
Acknowledge his feelings. Start to
Yeah.
talk through with him what those feelings are and why he's feeling them. When your
Yeah.
daughter comes to you and she expresses a discomfort with the way that she looks, or someone has touched her in some type of way, or anything along those lines, do not dismiss it. Do not sweep it under the rug or explain it away. Talk
Mm-hmm.
through those feelings with her, right? Wives for your husbands, husbands for your wives. When your wife tells you that she's exhausted, she's raising your kids, she's working, she is carrying all of these loads, and she just needs you to take these kids for 5 minutes. Don't make excuses about it,
Right.
right? Take those 5 minutes, babysit your kids, because that's what that's the running joke with the men. They babysit their children. Babysit your kids for 5 minutes so that woman can have a break.
Right.
Wives, girlfriends, baby mamas, whatever. When your significant other comes in and
Yeah.
he looks like his day has not been great, don't start with the BS. Give that man a moment to breathe, and or take a different approach and see
Take
what
a
you
different
can
approach.
do for him, right?
Correct.
So
Yes. I
it's
mean,
not
be available. Just be available.
just
Be
be available.
accessible. Be accessible to the person that you hold to the persons or persons that you hold nearest and dearest to your heart, your family, your friends, your community, yourself, even. Because a lot of it, we as people that are in the community, a lot of times we extend so much of ourselves out and expend so much of our energy out, having these conversations with others, but we don't sit down and have the conversations with ourselves. So be available to yourself. Be available to having you understanding when you need to put yourself in time out. Like I know I put myself in time out all the time. Be like, hey, go sit down. I have to do
Yeah.
that. I have to do that sometimes because yeah, I know I can get on one. I'd be like, okay, all right, now. And rather than so you have to be able to check yourself and be like, okay, all right, I need to take a mental health moment. I need to, what is it? Issa Rae says the self-care Sundays. You need to have a self-care day some days. Like, you know what? I just need a day to just not even be bothered.
And be unapologetic
Yes,
about what you
yes,
need to do for you. Be
yes,
unsympathetic and be unapologetic, because if you fall to hell,
yeah,
then what?
correct.
Right? You fall apart, you lose it, you snap. What then? What? And then
Then you slapping
everybody
everybody, and
around
that's all
you
bad.
is, well, touche. But then should it be more severe and you drop dead? Because stress
Yeah,
kills.
yeah,
Stress
and particularly,
kills.
yeah,
And I know
and
what you're about to
particularly
say. In
in
African
yeah,
American communities,
yeah,
it
because
kills
that
vastly.
that hypertension thing is they don't call it a silent killer for nothing. It's like you thinking, oh yeah, I just got a headache, my heart racing, stressed out. Yeah,
That
stress will
is
take you on.
anxiety. That
Yeah,
other thing that we
it'll
don't
take
talk
you.
about and we don't
I mean,
diagnose.
anxiety, depression. And folks, like and I think that the conversation has to be that we everything bad doesn't make you depressed.
That's right.
Like you there's a range of emotion that we can experience that are not necessarily depression. Having a bad day is okay.
Right. It's
Having a
very
bad moment
normal.
is it's
It's
very
very
normal.
normal.
And we have to be okay with being uncomfortable because I think the I hate to say it, but social media has given us this false sense of this platform of everything's got to be okay at all times. We got to be smiling, we got to be happy, we got to just be laughing and
That's
joking
right.
and kikiing and la. No, every day ain't a good day. Guess what? We all have bad days, and that's okay.
It is human.
And yes,
It's
the full
human.
range of emotion, it's human.
It's human.
Yeah.
It's normal. People snap out, like people now of course we're not talking about the extreme. So if you go around busting windows and all this other type of crazy stuff, that's not normal and that's not human. I said it. I don't care how you feel about it. It's not
Right.
normal and it's not healthy. But you
Right.
are allowed to be frustrated. You are allowed
Yeah.
to be annoyed. You are allowed to be hurt. You are allowed to feel the full range
Yes.
and gambit of emotions.
Yeah.
It's what you do with them. And that is the
Correct.
entire point of talking about, and well, that is one of the other points of talking about the movie, the Joker. He
Yes.
wasn't wrong in any way, shape, fashion, or form about anything he felt from start to finish. It was the
Correct.
way that he decided to act out on those emotions that give
Correct.
you pause and that there are problems with and that are not okay. However, when you are not taught how to constructively deal with what you're feeling, those feelings will overtake you.
Correct.
I've been there. I was extremely volatile. Like people are saying, like, it's okay to not be okay, but to get help. It's okay to not be okay. Like, these are real mantras. They're not just hashtags. This is
Right.
the reality of being a human. In my early 20s, I was a ticking time bomb. Volatile is an understatement.
Hmm.
Anybody could get it. Like that was just the reality of where I was because I didn't know how to express myself without violence or some type of extreme. It had to be, well, if I feel some type of way about it, then I'm gonna put my hands on you. That
Yeah.
is not healthy. That is not
No.
normal. There were no conversations about how to talk through because that's not how I was raised. That's not what I saw. So when you
Hmm.
get older, how I affect change is inside of my house. We have those conversations. Having
Yeah.
children, are there times when you spank your children? Absolutely. But do you have conversations about why this took place and what's happening to make sure everyone is on the same page? Absolutely. Do you always
Hmm.
resort to spanking? Absolutely not, because that's not always going to be the answer. The crime has to kind of fit the punishment.
Hmm.
As an adult, where is there ever a reason for you to put your hands on another adult? There's not. Unless someone has violated you and touched
Yeah.
you, there is no acceptable reason why you should be walking out. Like we see these videos and we make these jokes or whatever. Folks talking about slap. I wish you would. Don't put your hands on me. We're adults. If
Right.
we can't
We
have a
use our words. We
conversation,
say
right,
we
use your
use our
words.
words.
If we can't have a conversation about what's
Right.
happening, then we don't need to be around each other. And I am
Correct.
completely like, I have the gift of goodbye. I'm
Yeah.
telling you, like, I carry it in this really cute little tote. It is absolutely gorgeous. And I'm content with it
Yeah.
because it's just certain things that I'm not dealing with, and it's not one sided. I expect it on both sides, right?
Yes.
So hold me accountable too. But these are conversations that we have to, one family at a time, can shift the dynamic. If we are
Yeah.
having these conversations in our homes, if we are teaching and conditioning inside of the homes to be understanding, and so Tiffany said it's not always necessary. It's not always the answer, but it's necessary. There are cases where you
Yeah.
have no other choice, but it's typically when someone has touched you and or violated you. But
but
outside
it's
of that,
also it's a fight or flight response.
it
So
absolutely is.
so if you're backed against a corner and it's you or them, but a lot of times we're never backed against that corner.
We're not.
We'll put ourselves in a corner
Yeah.
so we can justify. the fight or flight response. But a lot of times there is always the
There's another
opportunity to
option.
there's always another opportunity. So I think that, some of that is, conditioning. Some people are just, they have to go. They be
Zero
ready
to
to,
60.
yeah. Well, I'd say 0 to 10,000. I used to have a real bad attitude. I've come a long way. Um, and I think it was just life. Life has a way of conditioning you. But I would say that, yeah. I mean, growing up, in not knowing, like you said, not knowing or not being taught how to process through and deal with emotion, and so I met a lot of my experiences with anger, frustration. If I was sad, I got mad real fast.
They kind of went hand in hand, didn't they? Yeah.
Right? If there was no room for sadness, if I was sad, I was definitely mad about something. And but real you having
Oh,
to have those conversations.
oh, she was saying she was talking about spanking the kids, not hitting
Oh,
adults.
oh. Yeah, hey, you know what? I definitely I was one of them kids that got busted upside my head a few times,
We
but I
all
ain't
were.
not that.
Yeah, yeah.
My mama go see this. My daddy go see this video. Like, what? We didn't do that. Quit lying on us.
But
you know.
so
I,
funny story. Well, it's funny now. Well, it was funny in the moment to me, but it's funnier now. And this just recently happened because we're talking about the frustration, and we
yeah.
are talking about the right time to respond to
Hmm.
people violently. And over the last couple of weeks, we had been doing the community givebacks,
Hmm.
and overall, it was amazing. Right, there was no negativity, no foolishness, all up until we got to the close to the last event.
Yeah.
um we had really like no issues, and I let someone take me there.
Hmm.
I know me, you know me, we went to college together.
Yes.
So in most cases, I'm all right, I'm a gone. But there was a lady who was looking for the response that she got from me. So she was nitpicking the whole time, complaining about everything. And the icing on the cake for me was that she confronted one of the children that was with us. Um, I'm not gonna say that I would have handled that any differently than I did. I'm not going to say
Right.
that because I may very well be lying, just because when it comes to children and adults, I feel a different type of way. You can be, oh, Kalila is on here like, don't say that. I am not Kalila. You know me. If I'm nothing else, I am transparent. So I'm not going to say that I would not have handled that the same way, only because of this reason here. There are some of us that do not understand anything but ignorance. It is
Right.
an unfortunate reality, but it is a reality nonetheless. And everybody had been civil,
Hmm.
everybody had been calm, and none of that reached her. So yeah, she might have went 0 to 100, and she started, talking crazy or whatever the case may be. But I can guarantee that there was a different impression that was left. Now, was it the right one? I'm gonna say no, right? I'm gonna
Right.
say no. However, every once in a while, you have to stoop to people's levels to get them to understand. Now, we didn't touch each other, so it didn't become a physical. You know what I'm saying? Like it,
Right.
it wasn't physical. It
Right.
could have gone there, but nobody would have let it go there because it really wasn't that deep, right? It really wasn't that deep. However, we do have to, and I've seen, because you've done work in the jails. Everything, the way that we're having a conversation is because we have the ability to be able to do that. When you're teaching
Yeah.
people, sometimes you have to meet them where they are and then elevate them in the process. And it is a
Yeah,
process.
and but it's also too about establishing those parameters.
So,
Everybody has boundaries, and where where my boundaries in another person's begins, and I have to sometimes you have to reinforce those boundaries in very non-traditional ways, i.e. you have to be a little bit more stern than you needed to be, or a little bit more vocal than what needed to be. There are just ways to do it, but you have to sometimes, because otherwise if people don't feel that you have boundaries, or
They
that
will
they
push.
will disrespect those boundaries.
And that was the way that
They'll
I
push,
felt in
and
that
they'll
moment. Yeah.
yeah. And that's just, and but those, that's also part of that person's, their own, they're dealing with their, because I doubt it if that was the first time, and it probably
It
won't be the
probably
last
wasn't.
time
No,
that
it
that person
won't.
doesn't.
That was who she was.
Correct. I
Like
mean,
that
that's
was
just who,
absolutely who she was. Yeah.
that's a character thing, and I think that unfortunately, what her impression that was left, might not have been the best one, as you say, but at least she learned something about boundaries and people's boundaries.
And
It was a teachable moment.
it
I'll
was
just
a
say that. Those are
teachable moment, right? And for me too,
yeah.
because at the end of the day, yes, my platform is always going to be tied to transparency. I am who I
Hmm.
am, but at the same time, um, I am thoughtful in how I depict me.
Right.
Even if I go, when I go on my rants, because everybody wants to be dumb at the same time, right? I am thoughtful. I am very thoughtful and intentional in the words that
Hmm.
I place in a status, in
Hmm.
the videos that I post, because I understand. I
Hmm.
get it. Like I fully get it. Everything that I do is a part of the representation. My kids can see this 20 years from now. I don't want them, to read something that I've posted and see something that I've posted, or if I run for office or something along those lines, for people to be able to bring this back up. No, I said exactly what I meant. There is no reading into it. This is exactly the messaging. There's
That,
nothing to defend.
not to cut you off, but speaking of that, that scares me, because Lord knows, back in the MySpace days and them GeoCities days, I'm sure there's some content out there that I would be embarrassed for anybody to find. And I'm like, oh Lord, don't just let them be, have just gone away. Delete it, Jesus, delete it. That's all. Because I don't remember them logins. I just pray that stuff is gone on by the wayside. And this might be dating myself, but yes, when I tell you MySpace, GeoCities, oh God, no.
But,
It's all gone. It's be gone.
but all of this ties into, like the fact that we can even have this conversation.
Right.
It's because there are triggers there. There's a sense of boundaries there. There's a sense of self
Yeah.
awareness there. There's a sense of maturity there.
Yeah.
All things absent of the triggers were present. I'm not cousin. I am not. So we're not even gonna do that. It's talking about some come through and run for office. They not ready.
Yes, they are.
Not
Come
for
on.
me. Not for me. Give me a moment, sir. There. Yes, I can. I got you. They are not ready, and better yet, I am not ready for politics the way that they are right now. I'm almost done, sweet pea. But that is another conversation for another live. So we are
Yeah.
not going to do that here. However, everything that we have discussed has been in relation to this movie in some
Yes.
way, shape, fashion, or form. And I am
Hmm.
really happy that we were able to have this conversation. And like I said, if two people walk away with a willingness to sit down with their family and leverage this movie to be
Yeah.
able to open up conversations about mental health and mental illness and mental health awareness, then we have done better than what I even intended for us to do, because that is the point.
Yeah.
Everything starts and stops with us. As
Yes.
individuals, we have the ability to be able to affect greater change one household at a time. But we
Hmm.
have to start talking through and exhibiting that empathy and that tolerance and that open mindedness inside of our homes. We are
Yes.
like almost at an hour and 15 minutes.
Are we?
Yes.
Dang.
So today is the
I
holiday.
bye. No, I'm playing.
So, are there any
I got to go
last
fire my
thoughts?
I got to fire my barbecue pit anyways because I'm probably gonna put something on the grill. But yes, this has been great. And but you know what? The fact that we were able to have this conversation for an hour and 15 minutes
Because it don't
says
seem like
something
it's been
too.
that long.
It doesn't seem like it's been that long. I apologize to all the folks that tuned in live.
Folks been
Like, hey,
hanging
we
in
didn't
there.
yeah, we didn't mean it. We didn't mean for this to go that long, but you know, we this is what we do on a normal. Like y'all don't get to see this, but
Yeah.
yes, I will. We talks. So, um, but I thank everyone for their time and on today, especially with it being a holiday. And you guys, you know, for me, be safe. Go eat you some good food.
Then is gonna come out of this.
Do raisins in
No.
your potato salad. That's it.
So on that note, thank you all for hanging out with us and tuning in. Abe, I love you as always, and I will talk to you soon. I'm dying.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.